All right, hello everybody, and welcome back to the Swift.ai Remote Work Cybersecurity Podcast. Very excited to introduce our guest here today. Dave, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, my name is Dave Anderson. I am the managing partner TSC Security, which is a virtual CISO, fractional CISO, and general cybersecurity consulting firm.
Awesome, thank you, Dave. And introduction for me. Hey everybody, I'm Jeremy, account executive at Swift.ai, a mobile device management platform for remote teams across 100 plus countries. Remote teams like VioletX, Simple.ai, and Immediate love Swift because they save over $100,000 and 600 hours annually on ordering, equipping, managing, and securing employee devices with Swift. And can have the peace of mind that Swift is securing the devices and they're meeting compliance, which we'll be talking a lot about today, security, compliance, and things like that. So, Dave, let's jump right in. For audience who may not be familiar, could you explain to us what is a vCISO specifically, and can you tell us more about TSC security?
Yeah, so generally, companies hiring a CISO, it's pretty expensive endeavor. The your typical startup that doesn't really have generally the budget or enough work for someone to come in and be a full-time CISO. The You're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars in salary and benefits and all that, this, that, and the other thing. So companies like that would come to a firm like myself, where we basically can work for you part-time as your CISO. So like anything that a typical CISO would be doing as far as like setting security strategy, defining policies, all the way down into the nuts and bolts of like cloud security, app security, and so on and so forth. We can either actually do ourselves, or we can help you select another partner, that like a penetration testing firm or something like that. Like PCSOs typically don't do pen testing, but usually work with a few different partner firms to those for those things. So like what I do, I started this company almost a year ago. After working full time as a CISO for several years, and the generally right now, what I'm doing is helping the small to mid-sized startups either kind of build out their security program, get through SOC 2 or other certification programs, as well as doing risk assessments, basically doing, like I was saying, the whole thing that a CISO would do if they were actually working at the company. Um,
Awesome, and thank you for that explanation. I do want to dive more into SOC 2 later on the podcast, but before that, can you tell us about, and you can anonymize the names, can you tell us about a customer story, problems you solved, impact you made on the business, short term and long term?
Yeah, so one of my customers, they had a reduction in force right around the time they brought me on board. Their head of security was unfortunately part of that, and there was a lot of they were in the middle of getting a SOC 2, the SOC 2, and there was a lot of just a lot of things up in the air, and they really didn't know. They hadn't gone through a SOC 2 before. No one else at the company really had. They didn't know what was involved, and they had this audit coming up in a few months, and they were using a tool for compliance management, but they really didn't understand what all the different nuances. And then when the audit came, especially, it was there was always a little bit of negotiation you have to do with your auditors, because they may be asking you for like some sort of like materials or evidence that you may not have specifically, because it's not really the way you run your business. Because a lot of times these auditors, they kind of have just a basic blanket checklist they work with. Um, so I have basically helped them get all the ducks in a row, put all the controls in place and whatnot to help them get through the audit. And then when the audit came, working with the auditors to make sure that the auditors were satisfied with what they were seeing, and can like, we were looking for one particular thing, and it's like, well, then work with the teams. Okay, what do we have in place that actually provides that level of protection that the auditor is asking for, and be able to provide them the evidence that those controls were actually there and working and doing what they're supposed to. So that was probably like that was actually my first client, after leaving my last full-time role, and that was actually a really a really rewarding experience, like just basically being hitting the ground running with like literally, I think 2 months before the audit was actually due to start, getting everything into all sorted and whatnot, getting them audit ready. And then like yeah, I mean, then the other stuff that I've been working on is like I'm doing pretty big risk assessment for a current client. They're a larger, more established startup, and it's been one of those things that's been kind of slow going, but like there's just a lot of things that have been kind of unearthed
Hmm.
with their environment and kind of how they're managing doing asset management, how they're doing managing their security and whatnot. So it ended up being a very long list, and but we're working with their head of IT and like security engineering team now to kind of like prioritize those things and that way that the senior management there can actually put the right budget behind the right things and actually get a bolster their security versus just dealing with checkbox audits.
Interesting. And it seems like, only when there's an audit do people sort of realize, oh, I got to get this done, and they bring you
Yeah,
in. I imagine if they had brought you in earlier and you had plenty of time, not just 2 months, right, they would just be all set, right? Oh, here's everything
yeah.
that the auditors need, right? And they don't have to, run around and scavenge for information or like try to set things up on the
Mhm.
fly. And it's interesting that you run risk assessments for this other client that you mentioned. I'm curious, what is the motivation behind that? Is it because they also have an audit coming up, or is it because they're more proactive in terms of security?
Their head of security left. That seems to be a common theme.
Hmm.
Um, that's usually when a VCISO comes in. It's usually when the head of security leaves. So they 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 know that they have security gaps,
Hmm.
things that they know that need to be addressed. They just don't, they really wanted somebody to come in that had the experience that knew they could help them work through the process of like where are their biggest risks? Where do like what are the top 10 things that they should be working on right now versus like the other 40 things that may be on the list that like some of them may be important, some of them may not be important, but like what do we do now to like kind of hit that 80% of like improving our security versus and just work on the other 20% over time and just come up with a like kind of a long-term plan and whatnot. And ultimately what it's really coming down to now is it's like we're there's just not a security strategy in place. And there's a lot of different areas like they need an application security strategy. They need an infrastructure security strategy, which is primarily like cloud security. They just so they have a lot of controls in place and they have a lot of like tooling and secure and like things that actually are keeping their environment secure for the most part, but there's just a lot of gaps and nothing and no like kind of cohesive plan to just get everything moving forward because there's just basically they've had a lot of false starts throughout the years, and that's what I'm helping hopefully being able to help them come up with this like strategy that they can then execute on for the next like 6, 12, 18 months.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm sure that's your bread and butter. That's your experience,
Yeah.
right? And you have tons of experience, which we'll get into later as well. And I just wanted to highlight, you mentioned, you're running the risk assessments to find vulnerabilities and just patching security that wasn't there before. You mentioned asset management. You also mentioned application security. Could you help us understand what you mean by that? Like, first, asset management, is that like laptops, computers, or is that more like files or chairs or, what does that cover?
It's everything. I mean, that's the thing that makes it hard,
Yeah, yeah.
because you have you have your physical assets, you have your data assets, you have your other kind of corporate assets that may involve like your IP and stuff like that.
Mm.
It's it gets very complicated very quickly, and you have to be very methodical about how you approach the whole like problem of asset management. The probably the one of the easiest ways to to really get started with that is to do things like, okay, what do I have? Like, what assets do I have in the cloud? what assets do I have that are physical assets, like my our laptops or any physical servers, desktops, that those sorts of things. And okay, once I know that those I have those, okay, well, what is what's running on them? Because I mean, you have all these like either devices, hardware, they all have
Hmm.
software, operating systems
Yeah.
that need to be patched. There's software that needs to be patched. Like, what is the state of that? So that goes just kind of goes into the next layer of assets is like your software assets. Now and nowadays, you have all these software as a service
Hmm.
assets as well that and that's one thing that like that people don't really think about necessarily as much is like, well, and we're using Slack, we're using Zoom, we're using Google Workspace, we're using
Yeah.
GitHub, Jira, all these
Hmm.
other tools, and and then there's all these other ones you don't necessarily know about that the employees have gone and signed up because all they had to do is like just click to log in with their Google credentials, and suddenly you got potential data in a third-party system that you've never vetted before. It's like
Hmm.
you have no idea what their security practices are. You have no idea like how they store your data, who they share your data with. And these people, I mean, they're trying. Your employees are trying to get the job done, and they're
Yeah.
trying to like to do it. So they have good intentions, but even with the best intentions, they may not like they're not most likely not security professionals. So they're not
Exactly.
thinking through like the whole concept of like, well, if I put company data in this other third-party system and that third-party system was to get breached, then we're still liable for that data getting there. So there's it's a big problem.
Yeah, I
And
know. Yeah, I totally agree. And I think the employee, you said their job is to get the job done, and they might not have the know-how, they might not have the training, they might not even just have time, right? Or it's not even just part
yeah,
of their job. I believe the root of that problem is that system isn't managed, right? If it was managed, if that was automated, then that employee wouldn't even have to worry about that, right? So quick shameless plug for Swift.ai. That's exactly what Swift does, right? Manage your devices and make sure everything is secure, manage access to Google Workspace, Slack, Zoom, GitHub, everything. So that your employees don't have to worry about it, your IT admin doesn't have to worry about it either. So I'm curious. I'd love to understand long term, the business has onboarded you as VC. So what does that look like? Is it pretty much like easy and it's cruising, long term, or is there something bigger that either comes up or uh, yeah, or like different events like an audit, right? Like what does the long
mhm.
term service look like?
Yeah, and that's one of those things that really it's depends upon the client and what their needs are. I mean, like I like to do the risk assessments for the clients and let that actually get used to build kind of what the long-term strategy should be. Ultimately, I mean, some of these companies they're eventually going to go to the point where they're going to need to bring on somebody full time. So kind of my long game is to like help them build the security program they need today, help them grow that security program as they grow. And then once it gets to the point where they've matured to a point where they need to hire, they need a full-time security hire, or security leader, then I can help them identify that person, interview them, bring and help them bring onboard them, and then
Well,
hopefully actually be able to stay on board, like probably at a lesser commitment, to be able to be a sounding board for that person. Unless they manage to like hire somebody that's much more senior than me, and who knows? I still like to keep in contact with them because maybe I learn a few things from them.
absolutely. That's a very selfless business model, I would say. Working yourself out of a job. I think, and a lot, I think it makes a lot of sense. I think it's a great service you're doing for the companies, right? That's the best move for them is to, you understand that they go full, they hire a full-time person in the future.
Hmm.
But you're always there to provide the support that you have been providing with your expertise, right, in the industry. I'm
Exactly.
curious, what's the founding story for TSC Security? And why were you interested in transitioning from a CISO to become a vCISO to adopt this model?
Yeah. So Basically, it's kind of a funny story. About 5 years ago now, I started sailing. Got interested in that, and then when COVID happened, I had a I was living in New York, working for a company in New York at the time, and I COVID happened, decided to like move on board the sailboat for the summer. It's just like, okay,
Oh, wow.
cooped up in a tiny apartment, or actually like, and the sailboat was a decent size. It definitely is something livable that people cross oceans in. And then wintertime came around and decided to move down to Florida, and from there, upgraded to a bigger boat. And then was basically cruising up and down the east coast of the U.S. and decided that it's like the full-time CISO thing was kind of getting in the way of that,
Mm.
so to speak, because I was only really able to travel on weekends, and like if you're going out in the ocean and and sailing, you end up with you're beholden to the weather. So there was times when I just either put myself in bad situations but weather-wise,
Hmm, hmm.
or the it just wasn't able or I wasn't able to travel. Um, that and the CISO's job is not a 40-hour week job. It generally like it's 50, 60, sometimes more. That's one of the reasons that there's such a large amount of burnout in
Mm.
in the industry. But to make a long story short, decided that I wanted to go cruise Caribbean for a few years, and but I wanted to still work. I wanted to kind of keep fresh, be able to uh, help contribute to other companies' success. And so I decided to start up this, did the research on it and thought there'd be a good fit here, and decided to start up this VCSO consulting firm. And so far, I've been working mostly on referrals, and I mean, of course, that's how I got started with you guys as well. So we basically left Florida back in January, and actually spending the summer down in Grenada, all the way in the Southern Caribbean, where I am right now.
That is so cool that, you have that and then it just became this career and this way of life for you. I was curious because you mentioned, in CISO there's high turnover, there's high burnout. And you have experience both as a CISO and a VCISO. I'm just curious, could you give our audience a sense of, what is a day in the life of a CISO? Like 50, 60 hours, like what, how is it so intensive? And then maybe for the CISOs out there who may be considering, transitioning into a VCISO, any advice you would have on that transition on how to do it?
Yeah, so I mean, I would say that the general kind of day to day for like a typical CISO, and I've primarily worked in software as a service, like software companies that are selling uh, products that handle like what some people would refer to as high consequence data. Um, the a lot of times, like in those companies, you end up owning IT as well. So like kind of the enterprise IT, which is actually one of the reasons I'm also very interested in your guys' product. But so you're going to meetings, talking to the executive team, talking to engineering leaders, working with if you have a team. I mean, it's some CISOs are not lucky enough to actually have a team. Um, the working with them to kind of prioritize any of their projects, figuring out and uh, compliance strategies, working with the sales team on sales enablement. Because ultimately, I mean, when you're a software company, you're like they're bringing in all these prospective customers that are asking about your security programs. And
Mm,
like you're smaller companies, they may not care as much, but you get these large Fortune 500 companies, and they're going to send you this long questionnaire. They like see like it's like, oh, you have SOC 2. It's like, okay, well, that's nice, but we still want you to fill out this long questionnaire because SOC 2 doesn't cover everything. It doesn't cover everything that they're interested in. So there's all of those sorts of things, um, and then there's like also working with the legal team. As a security leader, I've learned a lot about contract law. It's very practically like I've probably reviewed as many contracts as like a probably first year paralegal at this point.
Wow.
Um, because you don't want to have contract wording that the company that is related to security that the company can't abide by because something happens, they go back to the contract. It's like, okay, you guys represented that you guys were secure in this area. You weren't. Now we're going to sue you. So, and all that adds up. And all of that can be in one typical day.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. It sounds like to me when you switch to VC, so you cut out a lot of the overhead, in my opinion, logistical overhead. And you can now just focus on the security part, right? And also advise other teams to basically offload some of that,
Hmm.
inter-team management, right? Working communication between teams, to get things done and execute. But you're the strategy person now.
Right.
Um, Very, very interesting. You mentioned SOC 2 and compliance a few times now. So I understand, talking to a bunch of operations managers and HR directors and CISOs and IT directors that compliance has been top of mind for small businesses, especially since the FTC released new regulations in May of 2023. Very, very recent. Can you tell us what small businesses should know? And also, what does SOC 2 mean, right? What is that? And what is how do you be compliant?
Yeah, so I mean, just SOC 2 really, I like to refer to it as just basic security hygiene. The it's actually it didn't really necessarily start out as a security thing. It was actually created by the like American Institute of Certified Public Accountants. So ultimately it was accounting, and it was like really kind of what they needed to do to secure accounting systems.
Hmm.
So, but it's been evolved and adopted over the past I don't know how many years now, all these different standards and whatnot. But basically, it has five different principles. The core being what they call the security principle, and with that, there's about I forget like 100 odd controls that you have to implement. Now, SOC 2 is not prescriptive on how you implement the controls. They just basically it's you have a particular goal or a control objective they call it, and you have to do something to achieve that goal, like managing your encryption, like encryption of like laptops, and managing encryption of any sort of data that's going like in and out of your network, and how you manage onboarding, offboarding, uh, the just having good HR controls as far as do you need or do background checks? Do you um, have an employee handbook that you make everybody acknowledge, and so on and so forth. So there's like it's like all these controls in a lot of different domains. But in the end, if you're compliant, you really honestly have achieved a lot towards actually having a mature security posture.
Hmm.
So you're like, and you're definitely on the way there, and it gives you the building blocks and kind of the things you need in order to be successful in that area. And that's why it just seems nowadays it's for any software as a service. I mean, most or even any other kind of online company that manages data on behalf of a customer, whether it be like individuals or other corporations, it's just become table stakes. Like there's been an entire market that's evolved around it. Like I partner with a company that sells software literally to manage compliance, and like they have their whole thing. It's like you sign up with us, get integrated. We give you the entire blueprint to get yourself set up with SOC 2 in the course of realistically a few months. Whereas before it was all manual, and that was
Wow.
and the first ones SOC 2 programs that I built were all manual. It was literally reading the standard, figuring out, okay, well, what can we do to get to achieve this like control objective, and getting all that implemented, getting it documented and whatnot. And now
Mhm.
there's tools that do 90% of the work for you.
That's a great thing, especially for business owners whose sole top of mind is sales or getting customers and making the customers happy.
Hmm.
So I understood some of that as someone with
Yeah.
networking and cybersecurity background. Putting my hat on, as just a normal person, business owner, I'm afraid now, right? What do I do if I don't understand what's going on? I don't know if I should be spending time on it. I don't know what priority this should be. Can you maybe help us break down to a normal business owner with no cybersecurity background, um, what is the cost or risk, or what do they have at stake here? Is it just an audit and then we get a slap on the wrist, right? Or is there beyond that like breaches, right? If even if you pass the audit, but if you're not
Hmm.
secure, the risk of breaches. What as a business owner, I want to know, what are my risks, what are my expenses, costs, so I can prepare for them so they don't hit me out of nowhere.
Right.
So from that angle, yeah, could you help us understand?
Yeah, and that's one of the things that I like to propose to like any new client is to perform a risk assessment, and
Mm,
that usually just involves having at the very most at the most basic level, um, talking for a few hours, going over like what is the business environment, like what do you do, how do you make money, who do you sell to, and like what is your operating environment? So like what's and that's more that's not just like where your technology is. That's also like how you handle finance, how you handle marketing and sales and whatnot, and figure out like, okay, what are the things that are the most important to the company? Like if this suddenly went away, would we still
uh,
or would we still be in business? Like if there was a breach, like what data, if it was to get breached, like what particular types of data do we have that it would be the most damaging to us? And basically work with the business leaders with that to kind of just go through that thought process, that thought exercise of like, okay, well, if these 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 are actually the top um, risks to my business. And from there, that's how you build out the rest of these things and get that, like, get them to understand what, like, where they should be focusing their energy, like, what they should be afraid of, what they
mm,
shouldn't be afraid of, and then you come up with a plan. It's like, okay, how do we handle these things? Sometimes depending on the business, just getting a good cyber insurance policy might be enough. Like, okay, well, it will cost us it'll cost us $5 million, and they like whatever uh, contractual obligations we have, breach notifications and brand reputation and stuff like that. So buy a $5 million cybersecurity policy and call it a day, and then they don't do anything. That is an option. I don't advise it. It's like you should at least like do the things that like will help prevent that cybersecurity policy from having to pay out. And on the flip side of that, sometimes the insurance companies will require you to. I've been seeing more and more some of the cyber insurance companies, especially when they write larger policies, are asking for things like SOC 2, because
mhm.
they acknowledge it as a base level of security that like if you're doing those things, that you at least are thinking about security.
It
So
sounds, yeah.
go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, it sounds like the solution to business owners who are now aware of this but don't know what to do. The solution to that is talk to Dave. Have a
Yeah.
discussion. It's important to have the discussion, right? And allow the cybersecurity professional to ask you questions and really dig deep, like really do a comprehensive discussion assessment, of everything that could possibly go wrong. And then you'll know, right? Then you'll know what your risks are. Then you know what you got to do. You have an
Yeah.
action plan, right? You mentioned
Hmm.
uh, building a cybersecurity plan for your clients. I wanted to switch gears a little bit. So, Dave, you have 27 plus years in the IT industry across Yahoo, Adobe, founding your own business from a systems administrator when you were younger to security architect, the director of security, and now, chief information security officer. I'm just curious to learn a little bit more about you, the person. How did you get into IT? Was this always a passion for you? And you're still doing it today.
Yeah. Yeah. I when I was a little kid, I was just I was I probably annoyed my mother a lot because I would take everything apart and put it back together again because I wanted to know how things worked. And I even did that with my first computer, and like it was a little, I was probably 8 years old or something like that. And of course, I ended up breaking part of it when I did that, but it doesn't always work in your favor. But basically, have been passionate about technology since the beginning, and one of the things that I did really early on, it was like when I was in my teenage years, I learned about the internet and was really fascinated about what was going on, with this new thing that they were talking about. And I was desperately searched for like how can I get myself on the internet.
Mm,
And this was back in like 1993, I want to say,
hmm
90, 93, 94. Um, Ended up finding a local ISP, got a like saved up some money, got a modem, and started to like learn about the the various aspects of the internet, and ended up finding like the IRC chat forums, and was like chatting with like people like to like learning about like all sorts of different
Oh,
other
wow.
technology stuff. And one person was like, "Oh, you you really should actually. There's a thing called Linux. It's like you ever." Because I was running like Windows 95 or something like that, or Windows X. I don't even remember what it was, but it was before 90. Yeah, it was whatever the previous version that was. And they're like, oh, you should use Linux. Like you'll get much more like use out of your like your internet connection,
Oh,
because all
wow.
the tools like really were built around Unix. And and the rest was history, really. Like I was like really jumped in with that. Got my first job working for a small regional ISP in New York, and basically help them basically build their business from the ground up. They originally were doing um, just like T1 circuits and stuff like that, like just kind of way back before broadband. Um, and they wanted to start doing dial-up. So I had to like basically build the entire like authentication system and dial-up
Oh,
system and things
wow.
like that. And then fast forward a few more years, and Web 1.0, as they were calling it, was coming into existence. So I was able to kind of take that knowledge that I learned from from the ISP days and kind of engineering systems from that perspective to start engineering web systems. And then I basically went from that into what we now call DevOps. Um, Security was not really much of a like like a
Yeah.
specialty as much like outside of government. Really, like
Mm,
you didn't really see like people like literally focusing on security as a career. So it was always something that just like the people in the kind of the systems admin roles and network admin roles, they manage the server security, they manage the firewalls, and so on and so forth. So and as things evolved and grew, like I really enjoyed actually doing the security side of things, more and more and more, and made a focus to shift my career to be on like towards the security side, versus just the DevOps side. And that's how I pretty much got to where I am today. I ended up kind of cycling back and forth a couple of times between like primarily security roles, and usually like as like a security architect or something like that, to managing the systems engineering side of things. But then it's probably 8, 9 years ago. Ended up going into a company, Greenhouse Software. It was like employee number like 32 or something along those lines.
wow.
They hired me as a systems architect because I had they had that skill and experience. But then we ended up having a client that was, or a prospective client that came in that was very dead set. They're like, you guys have to have a formal security program in place
Mm,
and build something that within that, I think they wanted it like within a year or something like that. But within a year, that this long 500 question questionnaire that you filled out, that you can answer yes to all of it.
wow.
Um,
Wow.
and so basically, I then ended up taking that on within that company, built that up from the ground up. That was the one of the SOC 2 programs that I built from scratch. The previous one I'd done at another company as well, but we never. It was before SOC 2 was SOC 2.
Hmm.
There's this thing called CISO, but basically, and then kind of was there for 5.5 years and moved over to InParticle as their CISO for about 2.5 years, I want to say I was there. So it's been a journey and learned a lot, worked a lot of hours, and it's not just that's one of the things that's with security that's and even DevOps too. Like you don't you have to have the passion for it because it requires
Mm.
a lot of time commitment and not just at work. Like I have to spend a lot of time unpaid now that I'm working on my own of like researching like
Hmm.
what are the latest attack methodologies, like what are the latest defense techniques and technologies that are out there, learning about new vendors in the space and whatnot. So it's definitely one of those. It's a career path that requires a lot of investment, a lot of passion, and but I love doing it.
Dave, that's an incredible journey that you've been on. What would you say is your most important learning, throughout your entire career? It could be work related, it could be personal.
Um, Well, given that I started my career really behind the keyboard, and it was very focused on that, it was, I want to say like the biggest area of growth and learning was when I shifted from primarily working with computers to working with people
Mm.
and like learning about like what like especially like when you're high up in security leadership, you spend a lot of time talking with customers and talking with prospective customers, working with the like other like engineering leaders and whatnot. And that's not keyboard work. That's not like you're sitting there programming or like anything of that nature. It's face-to-face communication. And like that has been probably one of the biggest areas of growth for me because I spent my most of my time as kind of like learning the stuff on my own and being a bit of a loner, so to speak, the stereotypical computer nerd,
Yeah,
and
I can relate.
transitioning out of that into the like being on a day-to-day basis. Like, yeah, I'm sitting at
Yeah.
my computer and like maybe writing emails and like maybe typing up reports and stuff like that, but I'm not really doing all that much coding or anything like that. It's and the real output of my work really is the communication and expressing ideas and kind of working through like coming up with solutions for people versus being just kind of behind the keyboard.
How did you, was it hard? Was it a challenge to transition right into people work rather than computer work? How did you overcome that challenge?
It was definitely, I mean, there was a definite challenge. And it was more, I would say, really born out of kind of imposter syndrome than anything else. Because it's
Mm.
like I just didn't feel that I really could do that. Like, why would people want to
Mm.
listen to me? And but like as time goes on and you do it more, you gain more confidence. You realize that everybody else is just the same like, in that respect. Like so, like it's pretty much everybody like in the beginning is winging it until they get the confidence and that they're able to communicate to other people like what they want and listen. And that's probably the number,
Mhm.
number one thing. It's not just talking to people, it's actually listening to people and understanding what they're saying and 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 also making sure that they feel listened to so and you can be able to help them.
100% agree. Dave, do you have an extra like 2, 3 minutes?
Yeah.
I really want to ask you about sailing because that is so interesting to me. That's like one of my dreams is to like eventually learn how to sail. So you lived in New York most of your life, and you
Yeah.
just sailed down to Florida and just stayed there because it's warm. Like, what's the story around that?
Well, the funny thing is, I had a boat problem. Um, Me and my other half, we start like we lived or had our in-laws have a place down in South Jersey, and we'd go kayaking on like on weekends and stuff like that. And there was this like place this like sandbar that basically we would kayak out to. That was basically like right maybe like a half mile offshore. And people would bring their power boats there and whatever. And like people had like picnics and like just kind of like party on the sandbar that would eventually disappear part of the day during a high tide. Decided like, well, let's upgrade to a motorboat. Get us here faster and maybe a little more fun. And then ended up like then upgrading, like seeing these sailboats, and it's like, oh, that looks really interesting. Ended up taking a sailing course in actually Manhattan in the Hudson River, and really just getting hooked on it. And then like just continuing on from there, just going and getting additional training. We went down to Florida, down to Key West, and did a 7 day liveaboard sailing instruction course. Ended up breaking some fingers when I did that, but it's just a long story. But that didn't discourage me though. And then like a year later, we ended up buying the sailboat that we had in New Jersey, and basically take that on weekends and sail it around like kind of the New York Bay and Jersey coast and whatnot. And then yeah, like I said, like went to Florida and sailed around there. It's just been it's been a huge learning experience, a lot of mistakes. It's one of those sailing is one of those things. It sounds harder than it is.
Oh,
Um, it's relatively at the basics level, it's easy to learn. But it's one of those things that like you have there. I mean, there's people that we were around that are like in their 70s and 80s that like they've been sailing since they were like little kids, and they still learn something every time they go out. So it's one of those things like I like to say it's easy to learn, but you're going to be learning for the rest of your life.
what gave you the idea of, oh, it's COVID, I'm gonna sail. I'm gonna live on the boat, right? Out in the ocean rather than stuck in our New York apartment. Like what gave you like sure, like yeah, that's a cool idea, but like what like you actually did it. Like what?
It's funny. There's plenty, yeah, YouTube. There was there basically that how like we learned about the whole thing initially was the sailing side of it at least. There's a bunch of YouTube channels that basically there's a lot of people that sail around the world, and they document their whole experience and everything on YouTube, and they have like huge numbers of followers and
Okay.
whatnot. So
I'm one of
ended up
them.
just seeing that and like really got hooked on the idea. Didn't think it was going to happen as soon as it did. But like COVID and remote work being
Mhm.
kind of cemented into the workplace really kind of made the difference there. And now like thanks to Starlink, I mean we're able to
Oh
talk like
wow.
just as if I'm on a terrestrial internet connection.
Holy cow, so you're not only a VCSO, you're a VCSO on a sailboat. That is so cool. Wait, are you on your boat
Yeah,
right now?
yeah,
Oh, that is crazy.
yeah.
Oh, wow. My mind is blown. Um, where to next? Last question, I promise. Where to next, Dave? You've sailed, up and down the East Coast of the US and down to the Caribbean even. Where do you want to go next?
We got a late start getting that. We didn't leave Miami until January 1st. So there was a lot of the Caribbean we had to skip over. There was some places we were in for a while because we were waiting for a weather window. Because you're very beholden to the weather. So like if the wind isn't coming from the right direction, or if there's been a storm that came through and just kind of like riled up the ocean or anything like
Hmm.
that, you can't really go into it. So we the plan is to go up and down the Caribbean at least one more season. So when hurricane season's over on November 1st, start working our way north, hit up places we really liked, hit it and like explore the places we skipped over, and then work our way back down I spend another summer in Grenada, maybe go down to Trinidad, maybe go to Central America.
Wow.
It really is like as long as I've got the Starlink internet and enough clients to so I don't have to like eat up my savings, then
Yeah,
pretty
yeah.
much can do it for as long as I want.
That is so cool. All right, this is a very dumb request I'm about to ask you, but I'm gonna shoot my shot. You can totally say no. Uh, can we see the view outside? Is that a thing? Are you on a
Yeah,
laptop or
yeah. Give me
is
one
that a
second.
oh holy cow?
Yeah,
Oh my God. Oh my God. Okay.
let's see if this
So
works.
I'm gonna narrate what Dave is doing. Dave is walking out, it seems. Oh
Okay,
my God, that's
and
beautiful. It's
let
blurred,
me
but
see
I
if I
but
can
it's beautiful.
shut off the virtual background. There you
Oh
go.
my God.
Yeah. So this is the
It
bay
all
in Grenada
it
that I'm in
almost
right now.
looks like another virtual background. It looks so beautiful. Oh my God.
Actually, yeah, I should
Wow.
shoot a like one of the live videos or something like that, and actually make that the virtual background.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. Thank you so much, Dave. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. I'll let you yeah, walk back. Oh, that is so cool. Oh my God. The last question, we're gonna hop off now. Who should reach out to you and what's the best way to reach you, Dave?
So best way to reach me is by email. So just Dave at tsc-security.com. I have a simple website set up, tsc-security.com. There's a contact me form on there as well. It's don't judge me by the website. I'm not a website designer, and that's not been a huge priority to really upgrade it. But or always LinkedIn, connect to LinkedIn. I'm always open to connecting with more people and expanding my network.
Awesome. And links will be in the description. And just the last plug for us. Hey, folks, do you manage a remote team or hybrid team? Sign up for free and start managing devices at swift.ai. And special promotion for podcast listeners. If you like Swift and want to manage up to 100 or more employees, let us know you came from the podcast. We'll give you a 20% off the upgrade. Awesome. So thank you so much, Dave, for speaking with us, for showing us
Yep,
your beautiful view and also your wealth of experience and wisdom and knowledge. It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much.
yep. Likewise.
See
Thank
y'all
you.
next time. Thank
All
you.
right.